India's new farm reforms have led to some minor protests and major misconceptions. Welcome to this week's Geometric View, where we don't take sides on the agri bills, but look at some hard data and some international examples to draw our own conclusions. One of the biggest misconceptions across a large section of our society and even among a number of our graduates is that India is severely short of food production and therefore the poverty in this country. Nothing can be farther from the truth. Fact is, after our Green Revolution and the White Revolution, India has turned its food deficit crisis on its head into a food surplus crisis. School and college textbooks may not have changed much from the 1960s. In those days, when we spoke about a food crisis, it always meant a food deficit crisis. Today, when we speak about a food crisis, it means a food surplus crisis. And very many are still not aware of the changed ground reality. India is the largest producer or one of the world's largest producers of milk, sugarcane, pulses, cereals, vegetables, fruits, fish, livestock, poultry, and much more. In fact, if anybody has taken the Make in India campaign completely to heart, it is the farmers of this country, even before that slogan was coined. Our godowns are full and overflowing. We don't know what to do with our milk, our rice, our sugarcane, our wheat, and many other commodities. From as far back as the 1990s, India has been a net food exporter. And this year, that food mountain has assumed Himalayan proportions, an all-time record of 297 million tons of food grain. Add to that the horticulture output of 320 million tons, plus milk, plus fish, plus poultry, plus livestock, plus. If there is an Atmanirbhar Bharat, this is it. If export performance is a barometer of judging international competence, then our farmers are right up there. Take a look at the list of the world's leading agri-exporters. See that, right on top among the elites, ranked 8th in the world in agri-exports. In most global rankings, from the per capita GDP, where India ranks a lowly 145th, to even the happiness index, on which we rank among the last 10 in the world, India comes towards the bottom of most global rankings. Only our farmers are right on top. And our agri-exports have grown from a mere $4 billion in the early 2000s to $39 billion now, a nearly tenfold rise. Which sector has grown so rapidly in these stressful times? 77 years ago in 1943, India experienced the Bengal famine, which killed 2 million people. And here we are in 2020, grappling with a food mountain. So much so that even the Reserve Bank of India has said salam to the Indian farmers. A recent RBI report said, India has now reached a stage where surplus management has become a major challenge. So if India's farmers are such world-beating champions, how does one reconcile that with all that farm distress and suicides? There are two key reasons. First, India's farm sector is easily the most overstaffed in the whole world, and by extension, having the lowest productivity. 60% of Indians depend on agriculture for a livelihood. That is 780 million people, or 1/10 of the whole world. For comparison, the United States and Europe had about 60% people in agriculture at the end of the 19th century. In the 100 years of the 20th century, they could get most of them out, releasing them for industry and services. So the US now has 2% of its population in agriculture. India in 2020 is where the United States was 120 years ago in 1900. We still have 60% of our people in agriculture, and they contribute only 15% to the GDP. No major modern nation can have either 60% people working on the farms or contributing as much as 15% to the GDP. For comparison, China has 7% of its GDP coming from agriculture, and given China's large $14 trillion economy, even that adds up to about half of India's entire GDP. Second, the issue of post-independence governments wanting to always keep food prices as low as possible. Food security has been the watchword for successive Soviet-thinking, socialist-minded Indian governments for decades. So the farmers of Bharat have been reduced to laboring on their fields to produce cheap food for Indians, meaning the urban residents. So whenever potato or onion prices rise, the government intervenes and brings down the prices, and Bharat loses out every time. But when prices fall, there is no such intervention, and farmers are forced to throw their onions and brinjals and tomatoes on the roads and pour their milk in the gutters. So when onion prices shot up recently, the same NDA government that says it's going to free farmers from the control regime immediately imposed an export ban on onions because it has to keep urban Indians happy. And so the farmers of Bharat lost out on an export opportunity and getting good prices. Also note that the government is extremely vague even when it says it's freeing farmers from the control regime. The very day after the bills were passed, the Prime Minister himself said that the mandis or the markets would stay and the MSP or the minimum support price regime would also remain. Even more shocking is India's refusal to let its farmers use the latest technology or even seeds. Our leaders are all the time talking about going high-tech, but see what's happening on the ground. Jeevan Saini, a marginal farmer in Haryana, a few years ago planted BT brinjal in his plot. His entire crop was uprooted because he didn't have the permission to plant that particular variety. And who has to give permission? The GEAC, or the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee, formed in 2009. The GEAC met some 35 times between 2011 and 2020, but has yet not decided whether to permit growing of BT brinjal or BT mustard. Are you aware that there is a civil disobedience movement going on in Maharashtra over the last 3 years, with farmers openly defying the law and planting HT-GM cotton or herbicide-tolerant genetically modified cotton and BT brinjal? The farmers say that the regulator is sitting on the clearance of these varieties, but the farmers can't wait. The farmers say that India allows high-tech in military, in space research, in industry, but not in agriculture. And down south in Kerala, a group of farmers are going from pillar to post, pillar the communists and post the Congress, pleading with every MLA to please permit them, literally begging them to let the farmers plant some fruit trees on their plantations. And this in the 21st century. Make no mistake, India's agriculture sector is the biggest victim of the license permit Raj system. Every step of its operation, from land to seed to fertilizer to pesticide to cropping to transporting to processing to pricing to exports, is regulated. Bharat's farmers are enslaved by the need to create cheap food for their better nourished urban counterparts. They are stabbed by India's socialistic attitude and they are robbed of a future for decades together. 1991 is seen as the year that India's industry escaped regulatory clutches to a large extent. 2020 is seen as the year in which India's farmers will also make such an escape. And as Bharat's farmers escape the regulatory clutches, many are asking the question, won't they be trapped by corporates and hoarders? Hoarding? Are you joking? The government of India has been the biggest hoarder around for decades, perhaps in the whole world. And the other question, whether they'll fall easy prey to corporates. Well, India's farmers have burned in regulatory government hell for decades. What does it matter if they're walking into a private hell for a change? It can't be worse than what they've endured over the last 7 decades and more. But urban India, which cries hoarse every time potato and onion prices rise, and shares social media posts urging each other to boycott these commodities to teach the farmers a lesson and bring down the prices of these commodities, have no business to shed tears for the farmers. The monsoon rains would be sufficient for the farmers. They don't need crocodile tears. Thank you.